This is another slide again as well, showing the difference between a hemorrhagic stroke, which is a broken blood vessel, losing oxygen, losing blood flow in red blood cells. When that comes out of the blood vessel, there's not enough pressure going downstream. You have a stroke, lack of oxygen. And the other picture back here is showing the clotting happening from emboli. It just goes down there and plugs it up, like sticking a Q-tip in your ear. You plug it up and nothing can get past there. All right, so here's an example of this different series of blood vessels that we have from going from a larger to a smaller to a smaller to a smaller. And this slide here at the very bottom part of the slide here, we're showing here, you actually see the clots in the transition points. We call them in medicine bifurcations, the actual branching points at which blood vessels branch off like pitchforks in different areas. And the clots here basically lead to blockages of all the vessels, nothing oxygen going down past there as well. So these are strokes from clotting. Now if you look at the cartoon animation up here, you also see as well that you have these larger surface arterioles and they come down into these networks. These are branching networks that kind of the main thoroughfare channel and all these smaller capillaries coming off of them. It kind of looks like a bunch of a messy hairdo to a certain extent, but the key point is that you have a branching system of smaller and smaller and smaller vessels. The entire blood supply is like a finely tapering cone that gets tinier and tinier and tinier, and that partially contributes to the forward pressure and flow in the system. Now this is this is amazing. These are actually we're looking at an actual mitral valve here, which is one of the valves to the heart. But we're actually looking at its blood supply. And this is connective tissue, and it's hard to appreciate that the connective tissue actually has a blood supply. But look at, and it's got dye in it, but look at all of the vessels. These are like root systems to a tree. If you ever pulled a tree out of the ground, these are like branching tributaries of a riverbed system. You see major channels get smaller and smaller and smaller, but if you look carefully and follow some of the channels down here, you will actually see that some of these channels come to an abrupt end, and some of them will be what we consider watershed vascular territories because there are no other blood supply areas coming to that area, so you block it off at certain points here at the small capillary levels. All the tissue in that area is not going to get any oxygen. And this likely is why many people develop prolapse of the mitral valve, where the valve itself becomes weak and it doesn't close properly. And you can see mitral valve prolapse under many conditions, including things that affect blood flow as well as infectious diseases. But until you appreciate that all organs in all the body have blood vascularization, just like this branching root system here, a system of progressively smaller and smaller and smaller branching vessels, that until you appreciate that, you cannot appreciate the commonality in the causation of disease across multiple organ systems from a singular or one or two singular common mechanisms of injury, which then puts the whole piece together. This is the common unifying thread and link that we are missing. This is why there is such a range of disease across multiple organs and multiple functions that is related to this branching network of 600,000 miles of capillary blood vessels in the human body to every organ that has life and maintains life. Block the flow in those things in small areas. Everything from human disease to cancer to diabetes to sudden death to learning disabilities to every illness you can think of, from Crohn's to colitis to fibromyalgia to chronic fatigue syndrome. All of these diseases are caused by the same common mechanism, and that mechanism has multiple different triggers. And in some ways, we would call this aging over the course of life, because the effects of the damage at the end capillary vascular networks, when they become damaged and lost from stress and infectious disease and heavy metals and toxins and many other adverse factors, they add up to the damages in tissue. We call it aging, but everything is under the same common root system, and it's a branching network. So a watershed stroke, as this slide is showing, again, it's important to get that concept that watersheds are areas only have one blood supply coming into it, and you block off that blood supply, there's no other blood supply to go pick up the area. Those areas are uniquely susceptible. In many of us, we have some commonalities across individuals that, you know, whether you're genetically linked to a person or not, that you will all have, if you have a certain systemic process that's blocking blood flow, many of you will end up having similar symptoms. Some autistic feature symptoms are classic across the board, say, for example, loss of expressive language functions. And the reason so is that certain areas of the body and brain have certain watershed areas irrespective of genes, just the way the system puts itself together. So that's a common thread. However, the rest of what can happen to you in terms of a degree of impairment from an adverse event causing things like autism spectrum or learning disabilities or ADHD, your degree of impairment is a function of the frequency, the duration, whether it's complete or incomplete, and when it occurred in development and how long it lasted for, the blockages of the blood supply. So you can now see the separation between Asperger's syndrome, where children are kind of on the autistic spectrum, but their social skills are primarily at risk with difficulties, and however their language functions can remain in various degrees of normalcy. How you can see that Asperger's now fits in the same continuum as autism, as also attention deficit fits, as well as sudden infant death fits, as well as schizophrenia fits to a certain extent, as well as the gastrointestinal problems, the kidney problems, the liver problems, the bone marrow problems, the immune problems. It's all linked to that same mechanism of the branching vascular network. Same mechanism across all problems here. And the watersheds are very, very important. The end arteries are most susceptible to changes in blood flow. It's a blood flow problem from blood sludging. It's no different from leaving your coffee and your cream in your bottom of your coffee cup for 3 or 4 days. The first day it's nice and liquid, shake it around, wonderful. After a few days of stagnation, it becomes gel. That's what's happening in the blood vessels throughout all the body for all these chronic illnesses and disease. Common mechanism for everything. And it's been known for some time, at least from the 1930s and 40s. Over 16 years of direct observation and research on them. And these are cancers. And this is inflammatory breast cancer. This is why breast cancers are usually on the left and on the outer quadrant of the breast. These areas are in watershed vascular territories. Same common denominator across the board. Fix the blood flow problem, prevent the illness. Restore blood flow problems and immune system functioning properly, because that's a blood flow problem as well. You cure disease. You prevent disease. We should not be out there running around trying to get vaccines for every possible contaminant that exists on planet Earth that you could possibly get. Millions of things you could vaccinate for, and if the pharmaceutical industry has its way, you would, especially if they convince governments to mandate that you have to have it as a condition of being a member of society. But when all bugs and all viruses and all bacteria and all parasites and all heavy metals and all of these toxic or foreign substances placed in your body, or even prenatal infectious diseases, if they all cause the same problem in the body and physiology, irrespective of the disease that comes out, if they all cause disease by the same problem in the body, they're causing strokes, then why are we wasting our time vaccinating for all these different things, which all, irrespective of what they do to the body, end up having the same common mechanism of injury in the body across the board when you get exposed? Why don't we just go out there and say, let's deal with the cause of disease and get out of the clouds and stop giving prevention for all these different things individually? Well, you can have all these things collectively, as long as you control the means in the body by which these things, irrespectively, are going to cause disease and damage.